So we continue today in our What Does the Bible Say About series, and today we're going to talk about that old phrase of being in the world but not of the world. We are called to be in the world, not of it. It's one of those phrases that sounds simple when we hear it, but the moment we try to live it out, we realize it's anything but simple. Because the truth is, we don't live separately from the world. We're surrounded by it constantly. We wake up into it every morning, work at it, build our relationships in it, scroll through our phones on it, in it. We are influenced by it in the ways we don't always even recognize. And that's where that tension starts to settle in. Because on one hand, we know we're called to live faithfully where God has placed us. We're not called to withdraw from people or isolate ourselves from everyday life. Jesus himself spent time with people, engaged with the culture, and moved among those who needed him. And boy, does our culture really need the church right now. It needs the truth of Jesus. But on the other hand, we also know that something about his world isn't quite right. There's a pull, a pressure, a current that seems to move in the opposite direction of God. And if we're honest, sometimes that pull feels really strong. Sometimes it can be show up in some ways, things we justify, attitudes we excuse, patterns we slowly drift into. And other times it's more obvious, temptations that are hard to ignore. They pull at you all day long, and you're like, God, I don't want to do that thing. Why can I not stop thinking about doing this one thing? Decisions that test our convictions, and moments we feel the weight of choosing between what is easy and what is right. Life is filled with that type of pull. So, what does it actually mean to live in this world without being shaped by it? That's the question the Apostle John addresses in 1 John 2:15 through 17. And when we hear his words, they can feel kind of strong, a little confrontational. This is the guy that wrote the book of Revelation. So if you guys remember that series, there's going to be a little bit of that taste here. So here's the word. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. So at first glance, when I started researching for this one, I'm like, okay, this almost sounds like John is saying, don't enjoy anything, don't engage with anyone around you, but that's not the case. And this is why context matters. Just before this passage, John reminds believers of who they are. He speaks of forgiveness, he speaks of knowing the Father, and he speaks of overcoming the evil one. In other words, he's speaking to people whose lives have already been changed by Christ. So when John says, do not love the world, he's not giving a random rule. He's drawing a conclusion from our identity. Because you belong to God, so your love must be different. And that leads us to the central truth we're going to keep returning to today. Believers can't love sin. Not because we've arrived at perfection. Oh no. But because something deep inside of us has been changed, is being shaped. And so John begins with a clear command. Do not love the world or the things in the world. It's strong language, and it's meant to be, but it's important that we understand what kind of love John is talking about. It's not a passing feeling or a momentary attraction. This is a settled affection, a deep-rooted devotion. It's about what has your heart at the deepest level. And John draws a very clear line, as he often does. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. This forces us to slow down a little and think. Because what John is saying is not that we occasionally struggle or that we sometimes get pulled in the wrong direction. What he's addressing is what we ultimately love. Love is so central to this passage. What we cling to, what we prioritize, and what we refuse to let go of. You cannot have two ultimate loves. Jesus said something very similar when he taught that no one can serve two masters. You will eventually be devoted to one over the other. And then this is where it becomes personal. Because it's possible to say the right things about God, to attend church, to go through the motions, and yet still have a heart that is deeply attached to sin. A lot of mainline Protestant denominations have jumped onto this with the LGBTQ stuff. They've said, we love you, but we also love your sin. And we need to stop it. We love you. And John was not interested in this surface level appearances. He's going deeper than that. But here's where we need to be careful. Not to misunderstand what he's saying, is that I'm slowly getting back to the point I started like an hour ago. This does not mean that believers never struggle with sin. We all do. There are moments where we fell. There are seasons where we feel the weight of temptation more heavily. And there are times when we look back and realize we gave in where we should have stood firm. This is just part of being a Christian. It's okay. It's part of your process of maturity. But there's a difference between struggling with sin and loving sin. Because a believer may fall into sin, but they can't rest there comfortably. It feels so uncomfortable when you really love God and you're doing something you know you're not supposed to. There's this part of your brain that just doesn't stop. There will be conviction, and there will be a sense of uneasiness, and there will be a pull back toward God. Why? Because your heart has been changed. The things that once felt natural kind of begin to feel out of place. The things that once satisfied begin to feel empty. The things that once defined us begin to lose their grip. And hopefully that's not because we become rigid or joyless. Hopefully it's because God is reshaping what we love. When God saves someone, he doesn't just change their future. He starts in the now and begins to transform their very desires. And this is because you belong to God. You cannot continue to love what stands against him. So if this isn't about rejecting everything around us, then we need to understand more clearly what John means by the world. Because if we get that wrong, we'll either become unnecessarily restrictive, because that's a thing you can do. You can just put yourself under your own kind of law. Or we'll miss the warning altogether and take the gospel as license to sin. So John explains more what he means in verse 16, and this is where things begin to come into focus, I will say. So when John uses the word world, he's not talking about creation. He's not necessarily talking about people. He's talking about something deeper, a system, a pattern, a way of life that is opposed to God. One of the study Bibles I was using this week describes it this way. Not the world of people or the created world, but the world as the realm of sin. In other words, we can't love the sin in the world. If that old cliche does stay true, love the sinner, not the sin. We all need grace. And I think there's a crucial distinction between the world and the realm of sin. Because some of this passage is not about withdrawing from life, which people have used passages like this to just get in their little silos, not preach the gospel, not share anything. And I just don't even know if they're saved in that case. I think they missed the point. They missed what Jesus is about. It's about recognizing that there's a way of living that is fundamentally out of step with God. And this idea goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. At the very beginning, humanity faced a choice. Would they trust God to define what is good, or would they take that role for themselves? Would they submit to God's will, or would they choose their own? Before the serpent tried to lie in the garden, Adam and Eve lived under God's rule faithfully. And then when they decided to eat of the tree, they started to decide what was right and wrong. And that's how humanity's kind of been this mess the whole time ever since. Because when we knew what was good and evil, we started to decide what was good and evil. And to love the world is to embrace a way of life that pushes God to the side. It is to live as if authority is optional. It is to say in subtle or direct ways, God, I will define what is right for me. You don't know. And John makes it very clear. This attitude does not come from the Father. It belongs to a different source, a different system, and a different direction altogether. And then John makes it even more practical by describing three ways this shows up in everyday life. He speaks first of the desires of the flesh. These are cravings that arise from our fallen nature, desires that have been distorted and that pull us away from God. As I. Howard Marshall points out, the word desire itself is morally neutral. But in this context, it clearly carries a negative force. It describes a craving that insists on being satisfied, regardless of what God has said. Then John speaks of the desires of the eyes. This is the kind of longing that is stirred by what we see. The eyes become a doorway through which discontent can enter. We see what others have, we see what the world celebrates, and slowly, and sometimes without even realizing it, we begin to believe that what God has given us is not enough. And this is an easy thing to fall into because life's not easy. Sometimes it feels like we don't have enough. And then there's the pride of life. This is perhaps the most subtle and in many ways the most dangerous. It is confidence rooted in what we have or what we've accomplished. It's a sense of identity built on success, possessions, or status. Again, I. Howard Marshall points that this pride carries with it a sense of emptiness. It may look impressive, but it's ultimately hollow. And what makes it so dangerous is that it often looks respectable. Our culture flaunts these kinds of things. It can even be admired, but at its core, it's still saying, I don't need God. And I'm sure you've met these kind of people where they invite you into their home and then they're just showing you everything they have. Like, this is just the best thing in the world. Look at my RV. Look at my truck. Look at all my guns. Like, it's like, okay, I get it, but calm down. Together, these three, the flesh, eyes, and pride, paint a picture of life centered on self rather than on God. But John doesn't just describe the problem, he also gives us a perspective that changes it. John concludes, or really solves it. John concludes with a statement that reframes everything. The world is passing away along with its desires. It's easy to read, but if we really stop and think about it, it changes how we see things. Just think about in your life how many times the world has changed what is good and what is wrong. Like, even in my short life, it is very different than when I was growing up. And it continues to go in a direction, at least in our culture, that is moving away from God. We celebrate people who want to mutilate themselves and call them brave when it's really a mental illness, and we know it. It's still in the DSM. Like, even the psychologists haven't got rid of it. It's just wild. Or people who have multiple abortions and people just celebrate that, and it's called progressive, but it's nothing different than pagan worship. Like, everything the world offers is temporary. The things we chase don't last. The satisfaction fades. The excitement diminishes. The achievements that once felt so important eventually lose their grip. We've all experienced this in that setting. Something we once thought would satisfy us just no longer does. Something we worked really hard to achieve turned out to not matter all that much, and it wasn't as fulfilling as we thought it would be. And sometimes that thing we thought we could have lived without, that thing even loses its importance. That's just the nature of the world. Mm-hmm. It promises more than it delivers, and it lasts far less than we expect. And there's a cycle here that we could easily fall into it. I'm not above it, I can tell you that much. Sometimes it's really weird to preach something. I have to be like, hit me in the heart this week. We chase something, believing it will finally satisfy. For a moment, it feels like it does. But then those feelings fade, and we find ourselves looking for the next thing. Another achievement, possession, experience, you have it. And without realizing it, we can spend our lives chasing nothingness, really. It's a little like chasing the horizon. If you've ever been out driving across open land or a long stretch of road, you can see the horizon way off in the distance. And as you drive, it feels like you're getting closer to it. But no matter how far you go, you never actually arrive. It just keeps moving. The bar keeps moving. And that's what chasing the things of this world is like. If I can just get there, just have that, achieve that, experience that, then I'll finally feel settled. But it doesn't. So we set a new target, a little more success, a little more comfort, a little more recognition. And that horizon just keeps on going. The problem isn't that we're moving. Moving's good. It's that we're chasing something that was never meant to be reached. God didn't want that for us. And John is trying to help Christians see that clearly. The world keeps offering us a horizon at which we can never arrive. But he gives us something better. Whoever does the will of God abides forever. The word abides speaks of something that remains, something that endures, and something that does not fade. While everything else is slipping away, a life rooted in God continues. And this means our choices matter. Not just the big decisions, but those small ones, the everyday ones. Those habits we form, the decisions no one else sees, all of it shaping the direction of our lives. Do we choose YouTube or TV over time with God? Should I read the Word or should I read this really cool book that I want to read? These kinds of things. Are we building on what is temporary or are we anchoring ourselves on what is eternal? Because one is fading and the other will last forever. So, to kind of sum this all up or in conclusion here, at the end of this passage, John brings us face to face with a question that is both simple and a little searching. What do you love? Not just like what do you say, but what your life reveals. What do you return to when no one is watching? What captures your attention? What shapes your decisions? Because love is never neutral. It's always moving us towards something. And John is clear. We cannot love sin and love God at the same time. But there's hope, because if you belong to Christ, your love's already being reshaped. You may still struggle, and there may still be moments where you fall short, but you are not who you once were. God is at work in you. He is changing your desires. He's redirecting your heart and teaching you to love what truly lasts. And that can take time. But over time, as you walk with him, you will begin to see things differently. If not, then you should probably pray some more. You begin to recognize what is temporary. Let go of what once held you, and you begin to long for what is eternal. I used to think that was like really hokey, like in my early days of Bible college, and then just more reading, and then reading some of the like really classics and things like that. I just started to kind of long for Jesus. Not any rush to get there, but like at the same time, Jesus, could you come right now? And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we intentionally fix our eyes on Christ, as we fill our minds with His Word, as we choose obedience in these small amounts, in these small moments, as we learn to say no to what pulls us away from Him and yes to what draws us closer. And sometimes that will feel like a daily battle. There will be moments where the pull of the world feels strong, and there will be moments where obedience feels costly. And the closer you do get to God, the more that Satan is going to want to put a target on your back. Just remember this, though. What you are saying no to is fading, and what you are saying yes to will last forever. So don't build your life on what is fading. Don't anchor your identity in what will not endure. Instead, set your heart on the will of God. Anchor your life in Him. Fix your hope on what is eternal. Because in the end, whoever does the will of God abides forever. Yeah. All right, let's go to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your word and for the truth that speaks into our lives. We confess that at times our hearts are drawn towards the things of this world. Forgive us for the ways we have loved what does not last. Lord, continue to change our hearts. Help us to love what you love and turn away from what pulls us from you. Give us strength to live in the world without being shaped by it. Remind us, Lord, that this world is passing away, but you will last forever. Help us to anchor our lives in you. It's in your Son's name and by your Spirit that I pray. Amen. Amen.